Hello, good afternoon. Nice to meet you in advance, since this is a recorded video. I'm glad to be invited to give this research demonstration. I know this MDENet community from the very beginning, but due to the lack of time, I've never been able to be very active in the community. I apologize for this. I'm happy that I finally had the chance to contribute a little bit to the community. A few words about myself first. I've been doing research on model-driven engineering from more than 10 years ago when I was doing my PhD in China. My supervisor was the one who translated UML books into Chinese. He even had to invent some new words like for use cases in Chinese. I had the PhD thesis related to the use of models and runtime for adaptive systems. Then I did my PhD on exactly the same topic in Trinity College Dublin, postdoc. At that time, I was hoping that I will keep working in this area, focusing on model-driven engineering and software engineering, get a position in some university, and eventually become a professor, hopefully. But then my timeline branched in 2013. I got a position in SINTEF, which is not a university, but a research institute. In the beginning, I could still do research on model-driven engineering, but applying it on cloud. But then it branched again after a few years when quite some people left SINTEF to the industry. And those colleagues are the ones who were active in model-driven engineering. So they left some project for me. So I had to take the role as half a researcher and half a project manager. So I had less and less time on real research and more on writing proposals, manage projects. So again, I'm happy to be invited to talk about my research again, so that I'm still not very far away from the community. I picked up some recent work that we were doing here as the topic for this talk. As part of the problem of working in the institute, focusing on projects, that we always have to chase the new buzzwords, or sometimes even the ones that are not so new. So in the previous years, start to see that we actually sell quite some projects with the keyword digital twins, which is not a problem for me personally, since I find that there are quite some similarities between digital twins and the models and runtime. I don't want to go deep into here and to start the debate about how different they are, but I think you may get the idea. I'll start with the example, a very brief example of a recent work that we use digital twin for software deployment, and then some thoughts and some research challenges that we have found from this work, and we have some plans starting from there. On saying this, I must apologize that please all keep a low expectation of what I'm going to talk. The first part is industry research, so it's quite simple from some perspective. And the second part on the thoughts, challenges, and the new plans are really just started. So to start, we have some industry research together with SME called Tellu. They make remote patient monitoring solutions using IoT and edge technology. Those colleagues who left SINTEF to join the SME, as I mentioned before, they are still working in this Tellu company. The Tellu solution involves gateways, many of them, as you can see in the picture, each for one patient they monitor. Tellu develop software on these gateways, and they need to deploy them into the gateways. They currently do it like this, putting a bunch of gateways on the table and do it together. But this is not the way they want to do. They want to do it remotely. But deploying software remotely into the gateways is not easy. Telio follow a DevOps practice, so every night at 2 o'clock, they start to build automatically the new software. After testing is okay, then they will start deploy this software into all the devices. But not all the devices are online at that time. Some patient would switch them off, some just has some technical problem, or some may just lost the network. And in addition, they have different types of hardware which need different variants of software, and Telio may sometimes need to deploy different versions just to try how they look on even the same model of software. So then we come with the concept, instead of directly deploying things on the device, we had this concept of a fleet. So they should be able to deploy things on a fleet without knowing what are the devices, how they are, if they are online. They just deploy things all into the fleet, and then things will be done automatically, eventually. This fits well into their DevOps vision of the whole company. Then is the question how to implement this fleet concept. It's an abstraction reflecting the real devices, and you can use it to see how the system look like and how and even to deploy software via this abstract fleet. So it is actually a model at runtime reflecting the real system, and later on we change the name to digital twins. I have some demo to show how the whole things work in a very simplified scenario. I didn't figure out a way how to record with the video, so I put the video here in the slides, so if you want to see, you can follow it up yourself, and if not, then I have taken some snapshot. So the thing you see now through the web-based GUI is a digital twin of a very simple fleet with only 6 devices of different types. And this is the fleet of the physical devices. You see the Telio gateway, the Raspberry Pi. There is also a camera, but you don't see it since you're actually looking through the camera. Back to the digital twin, we can say what software we want to deploy. And after some calculation, they will decide which device or devices this software should go and start the automatic deployment. And after a couple of minutes, you will see this particular software implemented as an extension application to the camera that will be shown in the configuration page of the camera. Now I jump in to introduce some perturbation into the fleet. So I unplugged the gateway. This simulates a very common scenario that when Telio wants to deploy software to a bunch of devices, some of them may not be online. But as a Telio developer, I still want to deploy my software, even if some of the devices are absent. So I keep on doing this in the same way as I deployed the software into the camera. So I select the version, the variants of the software, and then the fleet will figure out which devices this software should go, including the ones that are currently offline. And of course, the software will not actually be deployed into this particular gateway. since it's not even online. But then when I plug it, it will be automatically booted and connected to the fleet. After the gateway is eventually online, the fleet will notice this and also remember that I had tried to deploy a software into this gateway when it was absent. So the fleet will resume this task, start the deployment, and eventually you will see the software actually deployed on the gateway. It is a Docker container, and you can see it is running now. The whole tool is implemented in 3 parts. So we have the adapters to remotely deploy software into different types of devices. And we have the digital twin operator who manage all the twins of the devices, and we have also a GUI for users to see the digital twin and to operate on it for deployment and for monitoring purposes. I don't want to go deep into this whole implementation. If you're interested, I can share you the open source code of the very initial prototype. There's some interesting questions popping up during the demo. First of all, when I was trying to deploy that software component, was there actually a gateway? Because the target gateway was actually offline. So can we say it is in the fleet? And if we consider this as not in the fleet, should there be a twin for this gateway in the digital twin for the fleet? For our scenario, we do need a placeholder. Otherwise, this deployment command will go to nowhere. But if you always keep a placeholder for an offline gateway, there will be other problems and confusions, since you may sometimes doing things on something that doesn't really exist. And the following up question is that in this scenario, if we have a model or a twin for a real device that is not actually in the fleet, can we say that the whole digital twin is a true reflection of the real fleet? And then there is always the complicated problem when the gateway is back, what should we do? Should we just silently deploy the things into it? What if the user has already deployed something on it? Or what if the gateway has been changed for other purpose? This leads us to look at digital twin from a different perspective. What if it doesn't actually reflect one system, but instead model or reflect the multiple timelines that may happen for the system? So we call this a multiverse digital twin. Coming back to the demo, the solid lines are the timeline that actually happens in the system. And when we switch off the gateway, the timeline actually branched. We have the real system where there is no this particular gateway, and we have the digital twin that has a simulated gateway as a placeholder, so we can still deploy software. And when we deploy it, we are also making another branch where we have one device with the deployed software, and we may want to keep another branch where the software was not in this device, since at some point when we need to merge this virtual timeline into the real one, we don't really know which one we want to merge into. Should we merge the one where the gateway has the software on it, or the one where there's no software on the gateway, since we don't know if there should be a software deployed on that gateway at that time. The whole idea would get more interesting when we get the simulations into the system. Since every time you simulate, you are creating a new universe that is not exactly the same as the real one, but it has some information that are valuable for you to get a better understanding of the real system. And at some point, you may want to do something on a simulated world to see what would happen on the real one. And if this is good for you, you may want to merge the simulated world into the real world. So in the coming month or a year or two, we don't know how long, our plan is to look deeper into this idea of multi-universe digital twin. I've started with some ideas about what are the metadata that might be useful when we need to model a digital twin which does not only represent the real system, but it contains multiple parallel universes together. So here, for example, we need the metadata like which timeline the data is actually from, whether it's simulated data or it's expected data or it's real-time monitored data. And we need the traceability for the data from where it triggered this change. And we also need some self-descriptions like the timestamp or the confidence or probability you think this would happen. And above all, we need a better way to model time and also use this time to connect different simulations into the universe. A further plan is to use the whole idea to support business continuity. So simulate what would happen for the system, keep the record of the simulations and the adaptations you've tried on the system, and see at what point you can merge the system into a real one to prevent any disruption into the system. This whole digital twin will be at the core of the new project called Dynamic, looking at the continuous enhancement of business continuity. So that's all I have prepared. Thank you for following it up. I think I have more questions than real concrete content. I hope you still found this somehow interesting to you. Thanks a lot. Any questions or suggestions or comments, I'm happy to answer. Thanks.